Welcome to the Wow, great start there. Welcome to the Reproducibility Podcast Season 2. Exciting episode today. We have Sam.
Hello, I'm here.
And we have me. I'm Will. So I'm Will from the University of Chicago, and just want to acknowledge that Chicago are the lands of the Miami, Kickapoo, Peoria, and Potawatomi nations. Sam, do you want to say where you're from, what you're
I
doing?
really like the acknowledgements. I feel like being from the UK and currently being in the Netherlands, I feel like there should be almost the kind of compliment of, we're the people that caused that issue. So like some kind of acknowledgement of that as well. It's not quite the same, but...
No, I think that's valid.
we did bad stuff.
Mm-hmm. But where are you now? What are you doing, I guess?
So I am currently bouncing between the usual postdoc stuff of having a surprise presentation to give in a couple of weeks, analyzing, playing with stuff, reviewing, or just everything at once. It's like a PhD, but somehow different.
Like constrained within 3 weeks. You're like, oh yeah, right. I meant to do all of these things by this deadline. Oh well, okay.
Yeah, pretty much. I will say I'm getting better at saying no.
I am not. I have like 4 peer reviews on my desk right now. I don't know why I did that.
It's because we're so intrinsically rewarded in the academias by reviewing.
Yeah, right? Absolutely.
So it paves our way to do as many.
Yeah, how do we get reward or recognition for our peer reviews, Sam?
Ooh,
how do people currently do it?
Okay, so let going back a few years, the argument, or one of the reasons, is that it gets you exposure. And I like that idea. You supposedly get in with the crowd in a kind of networking-y way with the editors, the senior people, whoever. Maybe they'll know your name. I don't think that works because usually it's anonymous. So like, here's my free labor. Maybe I'm being overly cynical, but I'm not sure that argument works.
I don't think I've heard anyone say, yeah, I totally got this like career opportunity because of this review I did at this journal. I don't think that exists. Or if anything, that is not a reliable pathway to the top, I suppose.
Yeah. So there are ways of
that.
Recording reviews. The most basic way that I think is a really nice minimum is to just list the journals that you've reviewed for on a CV. Mm-hmm. So you can point out, well, I've been invited, I've kind of part of this community. I do collegial activities around supporting other research and putting back into the system. I think that's quite nice. You get a list. It doesn't have too many numbers attached to it. So it's not too metricized. Is that a word? Metricized?
Sure.
More recently, in fact, actually, since 2012, I dug out some info on this. A platform called Publons appeared.
Yes.
Within the open science sphere, it was bandied as a really nice way of recording your peer reviews, partly because it's not audited, but kind of managed. It relies on your kind of recognition of review email or a partnership with a journal, with Publons itself. So there's kind of validation of the reviews that you've done. You can't quite turn around and say, I've done 200 reviews. I'm the shit. It actually kind of tracks something. However,
yes,
Publons. How do I put this delicately?
No, please don't. Let's just rip the Band-Aid off. This episode, everyone, is us saying how disillusioned and upset we are with Publons as of this current moment.
And so in many ways, to me, this is a bit of a warning for us relying on services that are closed, that are owned by for-profit people that we know already collect and
Mhm.
sell this data.
Yeah, let's
However, and again, the same can happen with so many other platforms.
let's rewind. So we have Publons, and Publons is this system that allows users to have their reviews verified by an independent party through forwarding their thank you emails for the reviews, as well as through partnerships with journals themselves, where they can pass on that that you've completed the review. And then so you have a list and a record, and there was some really nice stuff. There were like stats on your review to publication ratio. There's some standards people are like, yes, at least 2 or at least 3 or so on and so forth. And then you have a list of your reviews and how many reviews you've done and stats on the last 12 months. All great stuff. But what happened recently, Sam?
Well, actually, less recently than than I realized. Again, the details are really easy to lose. But in 2019, they quote unquote integrated with Web of Science, which I'm going to interpret as was bought by. But do what you will with that language. And a couple of months ago, in fact, only in August, they moved the platform, the Publons platform, entirely onto Web of Science. Under the auspice of our users have suggested strongly that these platforms should be integrated for a better user experience. I'd love to see anybody that actually suggested that based on the user experience we'll get to later.
And also based on the Twitter reaction to this move, which was like, what happened to my Publons? What just happened? We've lost everything, so on and so forth.
Yeah, it wasn't a smooth transition. So my experience last week, I submitted a review. It actually was one of the journals that was partnered with Publons, so it automatically went through. I got an email saying it's been added. I actually thought exactly as Will suggested. I can't remember how many reviews I've done relative to number of papers, so I thought I'd just have a check. Sometimes it's nice to sort of ground yourself in knowing how much you're asking of the system in terms of review and how much you're giving back. And I was met with a Publons is no longer on this site. You'll be redirected to Web of Science.
Yeah, so it's no longer on its own domain, which above where it was previously, we could just click in, log in, and see all your stuff. Now it's moved to this Web of Science platform.
Be fine. if it was a better platform, if it was a more accessible platform, great. I couldn't log in it took me an hour to figure out how to log in because my account was connected through Orchid. Orchid is an amazing thing we've described before. It's a centralized way of having all of your kind of academic profile in one place and being able to connect that ID to other systems. It's also really good for things like name changes and things like that. So you have an ID that's attached to you rather than a name, for example, that could change, and institutions that change, and so on. So I couldn't log on with that. I couldn't log on with any of the emails that were supposed to be attached to this account. Somehow, I stumbled across this backdoor entry of you have an account, but you don't have a password. No idea why that happened there.
Sure.
I assume it's because maybe I've tried to log on to Web of Science at some point. So it's not a Publons account, it's a Web of Science account. That's confused things. Managed to log on. Thoroughly disappointed almost immediately. So I guess taking a step back, one of the nice things about Publons was that it was a dedicated platform for recording verified peer reviews. Now that's important if the thing that we're interested in is verified peer reviews. However, in the Web of Science, it goes into your overall profile. So the thing that's up front is your publication record, citation count, H-index, all the fun stuff that we know is by far the most important thing.
All the very rigorous metrics that are, reproducible and reflect, researchers' worth and value, and definitely is not a product of Web of Science and their parent company, Clarivate, who also push journal impact factors, which are also another metric that are rigorously measured and used to evaluate journals for
Yes.
their quality. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, let it be known, Reproducibility sponsors all impact factor metrics. So you can find your review record. Great. But it's a bit more hidden now. It's not the first thing that you find. You kind of have to go through a few different tabs. And it's less complete, for one thing. So you can't access or you can't view the kind of review level data. So whereas in Publons before, you could kind of say, well, I've got these 4 reviews for this journal. Here's the title of each paper. Like, you could get at quite a granular level. Now, so I have a dozen or so references for one journal. Click on it, thinking I'm going to get a list. No. I get a summary of that journal and its impact factor. Great. Thanks for thanks for that added information that I did not ask for.
Yes,
and it's not useful for a review platform.
Thank you for advertising your product to me, which is not the information that I clearly use your platform to record and to access. So, yeah, great start. Good impression from the beginning.
And let's also, to tie into that, Publons, as far as I'm aware, unless you had aspects of your profile that you chose to keep private, which I think was possible for some things, basically your whole record of review was there. You could look at your papers and stuff, but that always felt like an add-on. Now it's the opposite way, right? It's your citations, your impact factors, or the journal impact factors related to those articles. And then it's peer review kind of
underneath the rubble.
Away. Yeah, underneath everything else. But the added layer to that is that Publons you could just view, whereas Web of Science seems to have this kind of tiered membership system as well. So my first impression was, I have to be a member to even look at my own profile. That's fun. And I guess in some way, maybe I am a member by having a profile. I don't quite know how that works, but again, it speaks to this. It feels like it's shifted even more into we own this stuff rather than we're kind of helping to share it. And that was kind of always the case because it's a for-profit company. But now it just, at least by some of the reactions on Twitter, by people who were probably quite happy with the service before, is very much that it's kind of dead to them now, which I think is a shame because this was as we'll have a turn in a second.
I don't need a turn. I can happily listen.
I think this is a shame because we've talked and Williams wrote about this and we've talked across a number of these podcasts, either specifically us or other members of our little crew, that one of the things that's sorely missing is recognition for basically non-journal article kind of research-based activities. And this was one that, theoretically at least, there was a way to kind of say, hey, look, I do lots of reviews. I'm part of this community. I do stuff. And now it's not gone, but it's a lot more hidden and it's a lot less about the thing that you want to share. So overall, it's quite just disappointing.
Yeah. It's absolutely the same experience for me. Like, it feels hidden underneath. It's attached to your researcher profile with publications first and foremost. And yeah, it really feels like it's now part of this for-profit metric gathering thing that's not working towards the benefits of scientists. Whereas I feel like Publons felt like a little more grassroots, grounds uppy, kind of we're doing this because we see this as a service that is needed among scientists, and now it seems more a bit like, no, it's now another product.
Or at least if it could have been used like that, even if it sort of was still a for-profit company and stuff. It felt like the users could use it in that way, and now that is very much gone.
Yeah.
At least in any detail. Yeah.
So
not to mention the platform is awful.
Like, yeah, the
if,
UX.
If the user experience is good, I'd probably not care. That's also part of it? Like, they were already trying to take our data to sell it, so like if suddenly it went to a different platform, but somehow that platform was better, I kind of wouldn't care. Like, it's already in that big bucket of not ideal, but still maybe overall has a net benefit. Whereas now it just feels like no one's going to use, like, in a sensible way, because it's so unhelpful.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention that I've got about a 50% success of just logging in.
Yeah, so the transition was definitely buggy. They're forcing people into Web of Science accounts now. They're obscuring all the review data and making it harder to access, and also not making it the forefront of profiles. And also, it feels like it's not searchable anymore, and it also does not feel like something that is valued by scientists for scientists to, further themselves and just like sort of advertise themselves. It now seems just like another product. If there was one thing I'm upset with Publons about, I mean, I was a fan of Publons, and I guess the one thing that was missing was that there was never like an extra tier where people made decisions based on those metrics, at least, or not that I'm aware of. Like, people didn't, let's say, look at people's Publons profiles for promotion and tenure criteria to say, oh, your faculty are actually completing enough reviews as service to the scientific enterprise, right? There was none of that, like, sort of...
I think it could have been used, but it would have been one of those, like, other categories, right?
Yeah.
Rather than kind of the key contributions that are looked at.
Like,
or it's a almost like personal accountability record keeping platform that makes it easier to keep track of your own. Like, I'm going to start just having a spreadsheet of the reviews that I do to replace this entirely. But that also made that side of things easier. So you could say, I've done this many.
The record keeping part of it was definitely much easier. And you know what? I feel like this is almost a watershed moment. Like, okay, we know people are upset. Maybe let's not use Publons. Okay, maybe let's not rely on this record-keeping app, I guess, for getting credit for peer review. Let's actually value peer review somehow. And I think the way towards that is moving towards open peer review. And the reason I think that's the case is if you have open peer review, you bring transparency to the process, so you can actually evaluate the review, and then you can see who did the review and who did the quality review. So if people start to recognize that the review process is a significant scientific contribution, you can then, like, even making like reviews citable or just anything like that. Then you have it right there. You can then start to build metrics or measures on top of that if you want. One way I would suggest is using credit, right? Expanding the credit roles, so credit being the contributor roles taxonomy, where you have the 14 roles for research contributions. Imagine a world where, for example, editors can actually add reviewers to those contributions, to those contributor roles. If you have a reviewer check the software and they review it for its reproducibility and its rigor, then you can add the reviewer onto the contributions list, onto the contributors. yeah, so just in that little example alone, now you can see someone actually getting credit for their review rather than just counting and collecting the numbers of review. I mean, that's a stat that's helpful and useful, but now we're actually working towards a system that incentivizes quality peer review and incentivizes doing the review. And perhaps you can snowball it into having specialists, like people recognized for their specialization in a certain type of review, like software review, data review, or like extending this to registered reports. People who review in phase one to ensure the rigor of the design, they can have their design and be credited in the methodology contributor role. So there's so much that there's a system that we can build here. There's alternatives. So maybe this is a perfect time because of the absolute mess and chaos that Publons has launched into itself that we just tear it all down and build a better system, right? And rebuild. So maybe this is a great time as a call to action for all of us to be like, yeah, screw that system. Big fuck you to Clarivate and a big fuck you to websites. Let's do this better.
So
thank you for letting me rant on that, Sam.
No,
thoughts?
No, I enjoyed that. So maybe it's worth quickly taking a step back into. I have a few thoughts, but just for clarity, I guess what you're talking about is open and signed review. I assume, because if people are wanting credit for doing reviews, they kind of need to have their name attached to it. So I think that's useful, but I think just in the context of that discussion, it's always worth, and I find myself bringing it up a bit too often because people end up talking past each other, that open doesn't necessarily mean signed in the context of open reviews. So one of the most common critiques or kind of pushbacks against open review is the idea of having reviewer anonymity. Now, it might not be entirely possible just by not including a name on it, because of writing styles, who's in the field, etc., etc. But it is possible to share reviews in a more anonymous way. I feel like it's a slightly pedantic point, but also that some of the debates that I've seen around the benefits and cons of open review sort of sometimes assume signed and sometimes assume not. So it just really quickly ends up talking past each other.
Right.
I like the idea of signed assuming all the benefits that you're talking about. But I also don't think that forcing signed, or I think we could get some of the benefits at least from having journals having to share reviews, even if it's anonymous. But I guess part of the discussion comes from who do we want to benefit from open review. If we want it to be the kind of scientific method and being able to assess articles on that level, maybe we don't need the reviews to be signed, but seeing the full process is useful. However, if it's for kind of reviewer recognition, then you sort of have to have it has to be signed to be able to get that. But I guess it's also worth mentioning as well that an understandable pushback against signing reviews is that it potentially, depending on fields, depending on groups, depending on how much of an arsehole the senior researcher is on the paper, it is possible, as in all things, that there could be negative consequences to having your name attached to reviews. And as actually yourself, Will, and Sarah talked about in a previous episode, whether it will be the last one or whether it will be a few episodes back, I'm not sure. At this point of recording, we made the the nice point that it's typically those that are the most, or in the most of a kind of minority disadvantaged position, that are most likely to be the most negative impacted by any of these things. So kind of when we talk about the benefits, it's also worth having that kind of balance and sort of see where we think the balance should be struck, but then also kind of having that autonomy on the reviewer as well, because this could also be the case that those that with the most privilege, for example, I always sign my reviews just because I think one of my first papers, both reviewers signed it. I like the idea of openness. I did it for my next one, and then it sort of felt like, well, I've made that decision now, so I'm going to stick with it.
Cross that threshold.
Yeah, and part of my argument for doing that is, if anyone should do it, it kind of should be the most privileged in a way, because hopefully they can kind of normalize it so that it's normalized, and hopefully that means less retribution. Oh.
Well, okay, yeah. So I think, like, I totally agree that, of course, when I just presented it just now, it was utopic. There's obviously going to be some hiccups and some challenges to the system, but I also think what's useful to bring up is the current system, right? And let's do an opportunity cost sort of analysis. Like, what is the status quo and what is the alternative that I'm proposing? The status quo right now is that we make peer reviewers are not recognized at all. That I'm discounting Publons. That's not recognition anymore. I don't know what that is. Let's just trash Publons at every moment in this episode possible.
Fair.
So right now, it's $1 billion donation to scientific publishing companies because reviewers don't get paid for that work, and despite upholding the whole rigor of the scientific system, and so that's bad. Currently, we know people probably game the system, so people probably are in cahoots with the editor, may be able to get favorable reviews from their in-network, friends, peers. So, and we know, everyone has there's always a paper every other day or every other week that people are like, how the heck did this get through peer review? And we don't know. No one knows. We can maybe figure out the action editor and ask questions in email, but journals can stonewall any attempts to figure out what happened, right? You have some editors who may be a little bit less principled and also be part of this, right? So that's bad, right? I'm just ranting about journals now. This is great. My initial point is the status quo is it's not good for anyone, right? It's not good for the reviewers because they don't get paid, they don't get recognized. It's not good because it's not transparent, so we can't actually evaluate the reviews, and then we can't actually see who is doing the good reviews. We can, with Publons, we could at least count how many people are doing the reviews and say, this person is doing their fair share of the work in terms of publication to review ratio, let's say. But now we can't. Now we don't even have that. So, okay, that's the current system. With a new system I'm saying new, but with open peer review, PLOS ONE already does stuff like this, and I think others like eLife and so on and so forth. With open peer review, you can actually read the reviews and evaluate them. I think it's just a matter of integrating that into our incentive and metric systems, which is why I'm pushing for credit and sort of these ideas, going beyond simple collecting reviewer numbers or collecting ticking off lists, actually using this to reward people for doing good work. And that's how we change the system, like if it's not changing the values of the people and the players in it, it's changing the incentives. And I think this, like, open peer review, open being having it transparent, is one step in the process. And then the next step beyond that is having people sign it, having people's names attached to their reviews to bring credibility to that process. I agree that there is more of a chance. There is a chance that there's retribution and so on and so forth. But I think with transparency, you can offset that retribution and protect people from that retribution by saying, if take an example where someone signs their review and it's received unfavorably, and then you have the receipts to sort of say, hey, this was my review, and you can have it open to judge whether the review was, an asshole review, let's say, or was an unfair review, or whether it was the reaction that was completely unjustified, or whether the editor's action was completely unjustified. Now there's receipts. Now there's protection. So that's sort of my stance on things. And also with Publons going to trash now, it's maybe a good chance for all of us to suddenly go, okay, look, this has happened. We don't feel good anymore about this. Let's actually do something about it.
I mean, what would be nice is there's definitely a few case study journals for this kind of thing. So the first one that comes to mind is Metapsychology, where they basically everything's open. So the paper goes online as a preprint when it's submitted, or before, depending on what the author does. That's given a link to Hypothesis, which I'm not exactly sure how it works, but essentially allows you to make comments on papers on archive platforms. Cover that in another thing when I understand it. But then the manuscripts, the revised manuscripts, the reviews signed, all go into an OSF archive around the paper. So it's all kind of shared and collated around the review process. Yeah. So you can see everything, which is really nice. And I know there's, I'm going to have to find out which journal it is, because I have done a review for it, where they kind of compile the reviews into a separate document that itself is DOI'd. So it kind of becomes its own, I guess, research output of its own right.
Right.
And gives that kind of openness and credence to the work that was done by the editors and the reviewers in that process. I like it. I can see the biggest barrier I can see to this. I don't actually think that the barrier would be this could harm people, because academia already does tons of things that harms people and accentuates existing inequalities. I think the biggest barrier is going to be that the journals that most need this kind of openness are also going to be the ones that are the shittiest.
Yeah.
To put it bluntly, because if as an editor you know that for your purpose the reviews are, fuck it, that one was nice, that one was mean, that third one was kind of on the fence, flip a coin, publish. Or kind of bean counting, we had 2 good reviews, 1 bad review, publish, which is how it operates sometimes, right? Or actually I reviewed for a paper that I think about 3 days after I submitted my review, it was online. Because it was just kind of rushed through the process, and I actually got an email from the author to kind of say, yeah, thanks for your comments. We didn't even get a chance to do anything about them.
Great, lovely, excellent. Love hearing.
And we were happy that it's going to be published, but also what? But exactly as you say, if things are out in the open, then it makes that process simpler. And as much as I like the idea of post-publication review, I think the challenge is even bigger there in that it's not already part of the system.
Mm-hmm.
So it would require, I think, bigger buy-in to make it work. Like, I'd happily see the end of journals, personally. just
Yes.
scrap that system. Preprints is great. We still need some form of peer review, but the journal-based peer review, is that quality control?
Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, I'm definitely more cynical on this than I think some others are.
Shout out to some initiatives that are also looking at this and trying to do this, which is like, for example, pre-review. It's like a journal club for reviewing preprints. So PRE review. There's also I'm reminded of Saloni Ditani's article in Works in Progress magazine, which I think everyone should subscribe to, writing about how open peer review has not actually been tried. We have never really tried a system where it's just out in the public and everyone is able to just sort of have at it for an unappealing way to describe that process. But yeah, so there are initiatives that are looking into that. Maybe the places of journals have to be changed. There is, I think, value in organizing the work and making it, searchable and accessible in sort of modules. But yeah, it seems like the journals need to keep, we're after them. They should stop being rent-seeking companies. It's time for a change. I think in this regard, long due change maybe. And yeah, again, I think this highlights something about the WHO. So we have for-profit companies running these prestigious scientific journals, and they don't seem to be working towards the same goals as scientists, the people who very much consume and depend on their venues. Same thing with Web of Science and Clarivate, and how they've co-opted Publons. Their for-profit analytics company doesn't feel like that their values are aligned with scientists as a whole. So again, this doesn't seem like a viable venue for us. So it feels like scientists have to do the work and rebuild and look towards alternatives. And they're there. They're possible. It's just a matter of investing them and like taking a bit of a risk, I guess. Of course, there's the people who are most privileged are most able to take the risks. But I think in this case, it's the people who are most privileged who need to recognize that they're gaining from a system that is inequitable, unsustainable, and just generally bad, and push to reform the system to something that's better and something that we can reason that is more equitable and more aligned with our values as scientists. That's all I ask. Pretty straightforward request.
And kind of very much as you and Sarah brought up in a previous episode, kind of there's little things that we can all do in that regard. Like we can be selective about the journals that we review for and submit to. I know there's constraints in some fields. You have to have a paper in X journal as a kind of unofficial, if you don't have it, you're probably not getting hired kind of silliness. But again, as you have more and more privilege, you can not do that stuff. You can choose to publish in your Diamond Open Access journal. You can choose to go for journals like Metapsychology that are free at all points. But again, take the volunteer time and the kind of volunteered labor to get them working. You can, if you choose to, you can sign your reviews. I'm less certain about whether you can make them open if the journal doesn't already have that policy. And there's some really interesting discussions about kind of whether sharing reviews, if it's not via the journal, is okay. So there's been a few cases where folk have shared, like, this paper should not have been published, here's my review pointing out why, which could feel kind of weirdly retribution-y, but also could be the editorial process was awful and some kind of openness is needed.
Right.
But there's also, I think, some ambiguity and confusion about what can be open in the review process, and what you kind of at least implicitly agree to when you agree to review a paper. So I'm not sure what can be got away with.
Right.
What can be got away with there. But then also what difference is there between it being a post-publication review, if the paper hasn't been changed. But yeah, it's just to say there's little things that I think we can all do in terms of where we want to publish, where we choose to review.
Yeah, absolutely. Applying credit, the contributor roles taxonomy, the credit model to your papers to redistribute the reviews, and perhaps thinking about how we can expand and normalize that model to now recognize contributions rather than just these like authorship products, these publications at the end, right?
And is that something that you're thinking about trying to do in your journal, or?
We already have credit, and so my journal for reproducibility in neuroscience.
Sorry, as in for the reviews, you were talking about a kind of recognition for different parts of the review.
In part of our journal, we already have the public review summaries published. So part of the reviewers write this paragraph talking about their review and what they think of the paper, and that gets published along with the journal. And our journal's all online, so it's all on one web page. So pretty straightforward to access, straightforward to look at. And yeah, it'd be nice to have, it's an idea that we're floating at the moment just to see if we can do it. It seems pretty straightforward, honestly, but if we can, have like a reviewer contributions, like a reviewer credit, and see like they recognize that these reviewers, actually checked the code or actually checked the data and so on and so forth. That's in discussion at my journal at the moment. I think it's a pretty good idea.
I think it's a really nice idea. I can imagine it being adding an extra layer of complication to finding reviewers.
Really? Well, sure. If you want to tick off each of the roles, right?
I mean, it depends what roles, I guess, as well, and which aspects you decide to, I guess, mandate, for want of a better word. So if you want even a content and a statistics review, for example, if it depends on the field. Yeah,
fair enough. Yeah, I agree. I agree. That's an issue.
I think it's worth doing. I can imagine that being but then I'm often the one that does the opposite and sort of says I can comment on the method and the results, but this isn't my content area, so
right.
You will have to rely on your domain knowledge and the reviewer's knowledge, and that's just me being awkward and honest.
No, but how often does that happen? How often do editors actually okay, that's covered, we haven't covered this bit of the paper? How often does that happen? And right at another problem at the moment, reviews are taking ages. This is a labor problem. Papers are taking months to read. There's people are far overproducing scientific papers because they are incentivized to do so, and there's no incentive to do the reviews, and also postdocs are being fed up and like, I don't want to be in academia anymore. Why am I going to do reviews? So then there's now just a lack of reviewers and reviewing happening, right? Everyone's feeling that. Everyone is feeling that force in play. So to that point of it's going to be harder to find reviewers, it's already hard. It's already bad. And I'm simply proposing that by crediting the reviewers, people may actually start to be incentivized to do a review and be like, oh, I'm actually going to get recognized for the work I'm doing. And then from there, you can start to build specialist reviewer roles, or
And it would be
things
nice
like
to,
that.
this is kind of a little extension, but as part of that, reducing, or ideally reducing burden on the system. Open review, depends when it's shared, etc. I assume it would only be shared for published papers, which might make this harder. But some journals have like a shared review system so that new submissions can kind of see the previous reviews.
Yes.
And I think that's really important, because the number of times that you see folk that have said something along the lines of, it took us 6 tries or 6 journals, but we finally got it published. And sometimes it might just be it was a bad fit. The editor
Sure.
did a good thing and said, this isn't right for this journal. Here's a few things you could do. Maybe send it here. That's great. As opposed to sending it out for review, knowing that it's steaming garbage. And so you're laughing, but I know you've reviewed
Yes.
awful papers that you wonder, like I'm not begrudging or being
No.
like wanting to say anything bad about the authors themselves. Just this isn't publishable. It's not
Right.
strong work, and it would need so much to improve it that if the editor had read it, it wouldn't have gone out for review.
Right.
So they'd have saved themselves time. They'd have saved reviewer time. They'd have saved another cycle.
Right.
And also that if those reviews went into, in some way, were attached to the paper, or could be included in a submission, like that would be nice as well. If I was able as an author, more able at least, to, with my cover letter, say, like, here's the round of previous reviews. I've done these things to address it. I understand it's probably going to need to go through actual review at this journal, but these are the ways that it's improved, because that might also justify some really important decisions.
Right.
Like doing that feels like there's loads of little things.
It's funny because the situation you just described, I'm in right now. I reviewed a manuscript at one journal, and then it made suggestions and so on and so forth. It got rejected. Got the review request for the exact same paper at a different journal, and I messaged the action editors being like, I reviewed this at another journal. Is it okay if I review it again here? And I'll include my previous reviews. And thankfully, I read the manuscript, and credit to the authors, they did address my reviews and then resubmit to the journal. Not,
Sweet.
Oh, we got a bad set of reviews, let's resubmit again. So yeah, but it was like, oh, there's no communication between these journals. The only time there's that communication is like when it's within publisher, like, sent. This is it's not welcome at our what do you call it? Like our main journal, like our front-facing journal, but it's welcome at these like subsidiary, secondary journals that's still part of our publishing system that we're still going to profit from your paper from, and just like efficiencies need to be built into the system to just improve it overall as well. It's going to be better for science. Like I've been talking a lot about how it's going to benefit us as scientists and people, but it's really going to just make progress in science a lot faster and better, in my opinion. And just remove a lot of these frustrations that we just have to go through to deal with this, like frustrations with Publons deciding to shoot itself in the foot and move itself to another system that no one wants to use. Like, jeez
Indeed. I mean, and again, there's lots of ways that it's bad, but there's also lots of power that we potentially have to sort of do good things, or at least to not contribute to the problem. Like if you have a paper that's slammed so badly that, like, if you read it, you would know it's awful. If it had someone else's name on it, maybe edit it before you resubmit to another journal and hope that the review process is easier. Yeah. Maybe review in a kind of journal blind way, as opposed to, oh, this is my favorite journal, I'm going to do super hardcore review here. Oh, this is a quote unquote low tier journal. It's okay. I won't do a strong review here. Like, you're part of the problem.
Yeah.
And I realize that we've gone off on about 800 different tangential rants, but there's so many little things like this that we all have very similar gripes. And as supposedly intelligent, rational, highly educated people, we should be in the strongest position to say, okay, these are the inefficiencies. At the very least, inefficiencies, let alone inequalities and kind of ways that we make things worse for people.
Mm-hmm.
We can contribute.
we can do things. We can make this better. Like, we got this. Like, let's do it.
And if anyone out there wants to spend some time on an open source rip-off of Publons in its nice form, that would be great too.
That would be a huge service.
It is something I think a few people at SIPS could get together and put together the equivalent of like a Shiny app, where you could plug in, like, you'd still have to manually plug in all your papers, so it wouldn't have the validation side of things. But it could be one of those things that you get out your numbers, you get out your stats, you can kind of check out all the nice stuff that is actually useful, right? You can track when you've done reviews. You can see like what you're putting into the system as well as taking out. Again, looking at you, we submitted this to 6 places but didn't change the paper once. Folk, I know you're out there. If you're listening to this, it might not be the right crowd. Some self-awareness. Yeah, I think I always kind of come back to that. We talk about the current system and how it's bad, but then we also contribute in so many different ways, and it is possible to be mindful about those ways.
Yes, absolutely. And we have, with that, pockets of power which we can use to influence the system, and which we can use to improve the system. We've mentioned a few ways already. The pre-review is a really nice idea for groups, and it's also one that if you're in one of the ReproducibiliTea journal clubs, you could do that as like a say once a term thing, right? Grab a preprint, can write a group review. It'd actually be a really nice activity to do together. Take a little bit of organisation, but that could also be a way that as journal clubs we can and we can
contribute to the system.
Add training of peer review for early career researchers. So then graduate students, postdocs learn how to do a high quality, rigorous review, do a collaborative review as well, and also understand the system a bit more about what goes into the editorial process, which currently is not happening. And also just to encourage kindness in review and like ensure people don't go off the rails and smash everything with a hammer, And so if you want to organize one of those pre-review journal clubs, or you're interested in starting a community around open science and open scholarship at your local institution, you might want to consider the ReproducibiliTea Journal Club. If you want to find out more about how to start it, we've got starter resources and so on and so forth. Go to ReproducibiliTea, so ReproducibiliTea.org. Take it away, Jan, in your outro. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Will. You listen to ReproducibiliTea Season 2, Episode 11, Publons. This episode was hosted by William Niam and Sam Parsons, who are at Will_Niam and at Sam_D_Parsons on Twitter. This episode was edited by Jan Fornheim and produced by Sam Parsons and William Niam. For more information, I guess you could go to publons.com, I think, but you can definitely go to reproducibilitea.org. Thank you for listening.